What is up, and welcome back to another episode of the Wizards Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Finberg, and in today's episode, we're going to be jumping into some mailbag questions. I haven't uploaded in a little bit over a week. The reason for that is there's nothing to really talk about. I mean, my last pod, I kind of dove into the rotations and starters. It's probably a pod I should have done a month or two, in the future. But again, it's this dead period of the season after the draft and free agency and summer league where there's realistically nothing on the schedule apart from the schedule being released and apart from training camp starting sometime in September, really there's nothing going on, nothing really to do. So again, I've been tweeting John Wall highlights and just random stuff because again, it's a dead period. But I did wanna get on a pod real quick. It's been a bit since I did my last mailbag. So I asked you guys on Twitter to give me some of your most pressing Wizards questions entering the 25-26 season. Thank you to all that responded. You guys did a great job giving me some. I tried to at least answer as many of them as I could. Did some research, dove into the questions so that when I hopped on here, I could give you guys actual real answers and analysis on some of the things that you were wanting to know. So that's enough of an introduction. I'll get right into it. The first question is from @Kozor Jr., who asks, I don't know if this is a pressing question or not, but curious to see what you think on the Middleton situation. The Kozor Jr. says he thinks that Middleton gets bought out or plays and gets moved at the deadline. Basically asking what my thoughts are on Middleton. Here's the thing with Khris, right? He came over for 14 games at the deadline last season as part of the Kyle Kuzma trade. He's making $33 million as an expiring salary, but still a hefty salary at $33 million for next season. It's 33 or 34. I'm not sure which one, but it's up there in salary. And so 14 games that Middleton played for the Wiz, he played decent basketball. The Wizards were better than they usually are in those 14 games. They were 6-8. Middleton started in all 14 games. So as I've maintained, I do think he starts at either the 3 or the 4. And there's another question that we addressed that with later in the show. But I'm confident that Middleton will at least stick around for the first part of the season. Maybe he doesn't get till a deadline. Maybe, I feel like honestly buyout season is right after the trade deadline. They're going to do, I think, as much as they can to get some value, extract some value from Middleton as an expiring deal at the deadline. Like they did with Marcus Smart, couldn't find a suitor and said, you know what, we want the roster space. We want to open up minutes for Bub and AJ and Tre at the guard position. Let's just buy him out now. I believe Smart gave back 5.1, maybe a little more than that in his contract buyout. So if we're talking about strictly buyout, the vet minimum is, I think, for the season 3.6 million. If Middleton gives up, around $4 to $5 million back and then signs for the vet minimum with the team, I could see that happening. If he really wants to go chase a ring and the Wizards clearly can't strike a deal because it's different, right? The Wizards are in a mode where 2026 cap space is pretty clear. Over $100 million in cap space in the 2026 offseason. They're not, I don't at least think, in the mode of taking back even more long-term salary like they had done in previous years with Middleton and Smart last year at the deadline, taking back, big salary for the remainder of that year and also the following year. I don't think they're in the market for that. And typically, rebuilding teams, the trades you make, you're going to have to take back disgruntled assets. Now, I don't think the Wizards are in that camp. So, unless they can find expiring salaries that match or at least make deals work, I'm not sure that any type of Middleton move will be realistic. Now, I did some research. I did find a trade in which Gordon Hayward, who was making $30 million in the season that he got traded 2 years ago, he got dealt from the Hornets to the Oklahoma City Thunder, making a lot of money. And I don't know if the money was negotiated or if the Hornets said they'd pay a specific amount. I don't know, but on contract on paper, Gordon Hayward's making $30 million that year. He got dealt at the deadline on an expiring deal to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Vasily Micic, Tre Mann, Davis Bertans, a 2024 second-round pick, and 2025 second-round pick. So 2 seconds and some salary filler / a decent young player in Tre Mann that stuck around with Charlotte. in exchange for Gordon Hayward, who the Thunder were basically saying, we need a vet to make a push. Let's add this guy. Now, I doubt a lot of teams have a Davis Bertans that's making disgusting amounts of money, and that contract, funny enough, was given to him by Washington. But that kind of made that work, and so I don't know if a deal will be made based on how expensive Middleton is for this year. But if it does happen, the Gordon Hayward trade, I think is a decent move to kind of base that possible return off of. A buyout obviously still possible, but again, I think he'll be a good vet. I think he'll start at the 3 or the 4, and I think the Wizards will play better with Middleton on the roster. I'm sure like they did with Smart, they'll try to find a deal. If they can't, maybe buyout is definitely a possibility. But that's just kind of the options that they'll have with Middleton. So good question there from Kozer Jr. Moving forward, at Shea Butter Sauce on X asks, who do you think takes the biggest leap? Who needs to take, and also who needs to take the biggest leap to push the franchise in the right direction? I'll answer the first one. I'll answer it in bits. Who does take the biggest leap? But honestly, I've seen a lot of people say Sar, and based on summer league, a lot of people have said George. If you're asking me, I think it's Bub, and I'll touch on this more later from another question. I think based on the usage he'll have the ball in his hands as that starting point guard, I assume. And I feel like he'll have the reps and the opportunity to grow as a playmaker. And I think from the beginning of the season till the end, he'll have the most opportunity to take that jump, that leap. And I think in the beginning, it's going to be a little bit rough, like we saw with Jordan Poole when he moved over to that full-time starter role at point guard. But I still think that Bub is going to, from the beginning of the season to the end, make the biggest leap. You're going to see him be so much more comfortable as that ball handler, distributor, kind of the conductor of that offense. And if the offense comes from the mid-range and transition, especially if he adds that three-point shot on a consistent level, I think the leap's going to be big. And I really do believe in Bub, just as it's pretty evident the Wizards do as well. Now, the second part is, I think, more intriguing in this question, and it's who needs to take the biggest leap. And I think Bilal Coulibaly has to. It's getting to that point where you have guys like Bilal where it's like potential, upside. The rubber has to hit the road at some point. Like, you need to show something. And he has, right? He had a triple double. He's had games of 20 plus points. He's had big time explosive plays like poster dunks and big time blocks. He just needs to add more on the offensive end. That 3-point shot down, I believe, from like 34% as a rookie to 28%, that can't cut it. He needs to be way more efficient from three and make guys respect him from that. He needs to be able to take guys off the dribble with that quick first step that starts with a respectable three ball when they're not defending him with 2 feet in the paint. But be able to create for himself off the dribble and therefore also maybe create for others as well. So I think the offense has to develop for Bilal. I'm pretty confident that the defense is there and that'll continue to be very good on that end. But in terms of someone that's got to kind of develop, he's got, more time, obviously. He's going to be extension eligible in October of 2026. So contract isn't the biggest thing on his or the franchise's mind at the moment. But eventually it's going to get to that point. And for Bilal, he needs to show something. It's similar to that third year of Denny, where he really took off and was like, okay, I'm going to go out and sorry, that was actually his 4th year after the contract, but he did have a better year before that extension he signed, and then it made it look really well. Corey Kispert had a really good year before signing that extension, had a down year the next year. But again, this is kind of that 3rd year before he's extension eligible. Will Dawkins has shown a want to extend his rookie extension guys like Denny, like Corey Kispert. So certainly with a guy like Bilal, this is a big time, not really contract year, but sort of, with that extension looming in October of 2026. So who needs to take the biggest leap? I would say Bilal. At Slay the Dragon 69, it's a great username, said, at one point, does Tre Johnson work his way into the starting lineup in your eyes? It's an interesting question, a good question. I think number one, it depends on injuries. Like, you never want to see anyone get injured. It's an unfortunate part of the game, but uh, we have seen in the past that a guy goes down and you need someone else to step up for a few games. The Wizards had their fair share of injuries. Sar missed some time. George missed some time. Bub played all 82. He didn't miss any games, but even though the short amount of time that Poole missed, that allowed Bub to kind of step up into a bigger role. AJ Johnson down the stretch got a lot of minutes. I mean, Justin Champagnie started 30 plus games for this team because of all those injuries. And so, I think injuries maybe affect it. And maybe you see Tre starting quite early on. He could have a good training camp as well. Even at that, I still think that CJ McCollum will start over him to begin. If you're asking, and I think the real question is when will Tre be a full-time starter? Like, when will he be inserted into the starting five as like okay, this is your role. You're an everyday two guard for us. I guess game 41, like the halfway point, like I think even before the deadline, it's possible that they're like, okay, CJ, you played well enough. We're going to try to get some more reps for our guy, Tre Johnson. You can come off the bench for us and kind of start to, at the middle point of that season, a little before the deadline, insert Tre into that everyday starting role. So again, that's kind of a lazy take from me. I don't really have an answer to your question because injuries could affect it. There's a lot of variables, but I think by the midpoint of the season, it's very possible that you see him kind of take over that starter role if he hasn't already taken it over by then. Next question, at Lolo DC raised. My guy asks rotations, leadership, frustration, tolerance. Pretty straightforward question. I'll kind of answer these one by one. In terms of rotations, like I kind of tried to touch on this on my previous pod, but if you missed that, I think if I had to guess, I'd say it's Bub, CJ, Middleton, Bilal, and Sar as Washington starting five. I say that because in every game that Bilal played last year, he started. In the 14 games Middleton played for the Wizards, he started. CJ started pretty much the entirety of the year, even down the stretch on a Pelicans team that, again, was right there with the Wizards in terms of we kind of are tanking for a better pick. And then Bub, it's pretty clear with the Poole trade and all the other moves, buying out Smart, buying out Blake Wesley. Who else is going to start for you at point guard? They started him at point guard in Summer League. He played a bit of the one last year down the stretch. So I certainly think that's Bub's role there at the starting spot. And in terms of rotations, you'll see Keyshawn George, obviously, Tre Johnson, Cam Whitmore, Marvin Bagley, Corey Kispert. I think those are kind of that next five-man group. AJ Johnson, certainly a guy that's kind of lurking on fringe rotation player. You got other guys like Malachi Branham and Dylan Jones that I doubt will see the floor too often. Jameer Watkins will be on a two-way, so I don't think we'll see much of him or Tristan Vukcevic in the beginning parts of the season. Will Riley as well. I think that's a guy that's going to have to earn his way into the rotation. Not sure you can really play him over the five bench guys that I named before, but that's kind of my outlook on the rotation as of now. A lot can change, certainly. In terms of leadership, your vets, Middleton, CJ, McCollum, Bagley, I'm sure those are the guys that the Wizards will look for to lead this group. Was Poole and Kuzma and some of the guys like Muscala and Gallinari when this rebuild really first started. And I think you'll kind of see that the vets kind of come in and come out with rebuilding teams. They don't really last, as you've seen with Poole and obviously Gallo and Muscala. Smart was here for 10 seconds. And so I think, certainly you'll see those guys lead, but even the second year guys like Bub has been way more vocal. Keyshawn has been way more vocal as I've seen in Summer League. And that's been playing with younger guys like rookies and stuff. But again, I think in year two, they'll be more comfortable. Maybe Bilal can even step up. Bilal doesn't strike me as the vocal leader. I'm not saying he's not a leader, but as like the vocal leadership guy. Maybe he's like a leadership by example type of guy, but Keyshawn, Bub, they're the more vocal guys. Maybe they step up as kind of younger leaders on this team in year two. Cam Whitmore certainly as well. Again, third-year player coming to a new team. Maybe he kind of takes a big leap. But that's kind of that leadership aspect. Certainly the vets there. And then the frustration tolerance. I kind of thought this was the most fun part of this question. I would assume you're basically asking like how mad can Wizards fans truly get during the season where many expect them to bottom out once more. I'd say for me, and I'm an optimistic Wizards watcher and observer, more so than some of the more pessimistic fans that I've interacted with over the years. There's nothing wrong with being pessimistic about the team. Some take it a little too far, as you've seen from some of my Twitter spaces. But I would say that my frustration tolerance is quite high. I tweeted this multiple times last season. You're just kind of numb at this point. If you've watched all the games like me, even if you watched some each year, you're just numb to like losing. You're numb to the losses because they lost 64 games last year. They lost 67 the year before, and it's just it's expected, I guess. There's no expectations of winning basketball, and it's not like they're trying to stack the wins and make the playoffs at any point of the last two seasons, and probably not even this year either, which is what has made it a little bit more tolerable. I don't think it's quite as high, I guess, development wise. Like with Bilal, certainly, if the shot still can't go and he's still struggling in certain areas, then it starts to get frustrating, and you start to say, okay, like we need to see something from him. With if Sarr continues to not be able to defend the low post, if he continues to not be able to finish through contact, the rebounds are still an issue. Maybe you can be a little bit more frustrated. But if we're talking strictly wins and losses, I won't necessarily be too moved with that category unless they're like one of the worst teams of all time. I think mainly I'm looking at development of a bunch of the guys, the younger guys on the team, and that might be a little bit lower in terms of my tolerance there. But in terms of wins, losses, I think it's quite high still with this team, specifically, or sorry, certainly with that top 8 protected pick as well. Looming for next season. But good question. Um, Moving it along, my friend at Life That Goes On, Eban on X, always have fun interactions with my guy. He says the growth of the Wizards' second year players and the vets on the team. I guess he kind of wants me to dive into what I'm looking at in terms of growth from the second year players, and then also looking at how many wins that I think the Wiz will get this season. I guess I can jump right into it with Bub. I think Bub needs to get better as a true point guard. Now, what does that mean? He needs to be making smarter decisions. Bub doesn't do the greatest job, I don't think, at this point of getting 2 feet in the paint, breaking down the defense and opening up, shooters and other types of cutting lanes for his teammates. I think that'll come over time. I think he just turned 20 years old, so can't even go to the bar and ask for a beer. He's still young. He's still growing. And so I certainly would like to see him grow as a true point guard, distributor, creator, being able to find the open teammates with skip passes, with lobs in that pick and roll area, all the things that kind of make up your true number one, your true ball handler, your distributor, your point guard. I think I'm just mainly looking at Bub as that, if he is what the Wizards view as their point guard of the future. I'd also like to see him not only take more mid-range jumpers because he's really good in the mid-range. I'd like to see some more rim pressure from Bub. I didn't think I saw enough from it in his rookie season. I'd like to see him get downhill, draw contact a lot more. And then also from outside, there were some games where he was a willing shooter. I'm not concerned about volume. The efficiency is kind of what I'm more so looking at. He was around that 31, 32% from three last year. Would like to see that rise by 3-4% certainly, and beyond. But those are some of the things I'm looking at for Bub. For Sarr, rebounds. You need to be able to clear the defensive glass. The offensive rebounds, we saw a bunch in Summer League. That's against lesser competition. But again, he needs to be way stronger on glass, especially on the defensive glass, to kind of clean that. Stronger around the rim. Stop with the Euros and the fading layups. Go and put somebody in the rim. Go draw way more contact than he has. I remember there was a point in the middle of the season last year where someone asked me, Greg, is Alex Sarr like a good free throw shooter? And I genuinely was like, I think, but I don't know because I feel like I barely see him there. So I'd like to see him get to the line more. Then that low post interior defense, and that comes with experience, defending without fouling, not jumping on and biting on some of these guys' low post moves and fakes. But it's also coming with getting stronger, especially stronger base down low. And so I certainly would like to see Sarr improve there. Keyshawn George, three ball needs to be more consistent, needs to defend without fouling. Apart from that, I like a lot of what I've seen from his game. Maybe a little bit more of getting downhill to the rim. I'm not sure that's even part of his game yet. As a 3-and-D guy, I think the defense is tremendous. I really like his competitiveness. The leadership is, I think, an aspect that you might, start to see, emerge with George becoming a more vocal leader and presence on this team. But certainly defending without fouling. I mean, he played 2 summer league games. He had 10 fouls between the two. So would like to see him limit those and obviously more consistent outside jumper. And then, AJ, he's got to limit turnovers and be smarter with the ball, especially if he's playing a, point guard role with the ball in his hands. Shot selection needs to be better, needs to be more efficient on certain nights. Those are all things I'd like to see him improve on. So that's kind of the first part of Amon's question. The second part, win total. Again, I want to preface this. I'm going to give my actual win total as we get closer once we see training camp and if any other moves are made. Because I take this seriously. I predicted 18-64 last season. What that was released, the day before the season started in October. And if you watch the Wizards, you would know they went 1864, I should say. I predicted that, and the Wizards did go 18-64, thanks to that Bub Carrington buzzer beater against Miami. So again, I'm batting, 1-for-1 over the last year. I'm gonna, try to milk that as long as possible. But I'll give my actual prediction closer to the season. Right now, I'm around 21-ish wins. That's, DraftKings Sportsbook has them at 21.5. That's the total. I actually, funny enough, I tweeted that out a couple of days ago, kind of trying to get a sense of where Wizards fans were at with that total, whether they thought over, under, or if it was a good number. It seems like everyone was saying to smash the over, and I don't know if that's just optimism from the fan base. Rare sight of optimism throughout this rebuild, where they bring in Tre Johnson to look great in summer league. The second year guys looked good. Trade for Cam Whitmore. They have some decent vets in Middleton and McCollum. Re-sign Bagley, and they're kind of looking at it like this is a team with some good vets. They're developing, a bunch of players. Maybe Bilal takes a leap. Cam Whitmore plays well in good, in bigger minutes, and maybe this team is much better than some believe. And again, I don't think looking at this roster, they're miles better maybe than last year's roster. I do like the vets way more. Like I like CJ and Middleton more than I like Kyle Kuzma, more than I like him, even with Poole. I certainly do like the vets on this team. Bagley re-sign was good. I'm not as optimistic in terms of like I saw some guys saying 30 plus wins, 26-28 wins. I don't know if Washington can get to that point. That would be a really impressive season. Good coaching job clearly from Brian Keefe and the development staff too. I would be teetering around that 21-23 win mark. But again, more moves can be made. Maybe training camp proves me wrong, and these guys look good, and we'll see with preseason as well. But if you had to ask me now, I'd say around that 21 win mark. Moving along here because I want to get to. I'm not moving at the pace that I wanted to move at, but that's okay. I'll stick around to try to answer as many of these as possible. At Bandolero says, what does the minute spread look like for the young guys? Because there's a lot of minutes across the young guys to spread around, I guess, let alone giving minutes to veterans, trying to build up their trade value. The Wizards going to be playing 12 guys, 20 plus minutes each. What's the rotation going to look like, etc. It's a fair question. And again, when I was diving into the roster, I tweeted out basically like it's going to be pretty difficult for Brian Keefe to find minutes for everyone. Keefe's typically an 8 to 9 man rotation guy. Maybe he extends it to 10 with so much, uh, depth. And I say depth lightly because it's not depth like the Thunder have depth. It's depth like a young rebuilding team has depth with a bunch of guys that are still developing and they kind of don't know who to give minutes to and who not to. I think you'll see, some of the younger guys like Bub, Sar, Bilal starting and playing 30 plus minutes a game. Keyshawn George can certainly get to that point, 25 to 30 minutes. Could go way more than that in games where he's playing well or where the Wizards are relying a lot more on his defense. Cam, Tre Johnson, I think, around that 20-plus minute a game mark coming off the bench. At least that's what I'm predicting. Guys like A.J. Johnson, Dylan Jones, Malachi Branham, Will Riley. I don't know how they see the floor in the beginning of the season with guys like Middleton, CJ kind of taking up a lot of minutes. I don't see how that is the case. And so if you're looking at kind of the minutes distribution, that's my best guess. Again, I'm not with the team. That's, I'm not a coach. I really don't know what their plan is, but if I had to give my best guess, Bandolero, that's kind of where I'd go. Judah, you've asked a couple questions in the mailbags. At Judah BF says, I only have one question. Will development bring about forced tanking, or are the Wizards bad enough for development to leave them with a bottom 5 record? So I guess Judah's asking, are the Wizards going to try to tank, or are they bad enough to where they can just develop and try to win games and they're just still going to be a bad team objectively, no matter if they're trying to lose or not? It's a fair question. I think development is the main priority for this team this year. Like, I think if that brings more wins than they expected, then they're fine with it. I think if it brings a lot more losing, they're fine with it. As long as they're seeing steady development and steady improvement and growth from a bunch of their first, second, third year guys, I think they're fine with it. If Middleton and CJ are playing well and they're getting some good trade interest, then I think they're fine with maybe tacking on some more wins. And if they're playing well and they're just not getting it done, I think it's, they're indifferent. I think Will Dawkins deep down would realistically like this team to play really well and develop, and Bilal takes a leap, and you're seeing Tre Johnson prove that he should have been a higher draft pick, and the second year guys are balling out. But yet the team is still a bottom 3, bottom 4 team. I think that's a good season for them. If they win a couple more, lose a couple more, I think they're indifferent. And we see with the lottery, like the forced actively tanking really doesn't work. The Jazz fell as far as they could in the lottery. Same with the Wizards. The Pelicans fell. Like, a lot of teams got unlucky, and a lot of teams that didn't deserve to get lucky, like the Sixers, like the Mavs, they did get lucky. And so I think we might see a little bit different approach from the Wizards, but I think development is the main priority, and the wins, losses, they'll kind of figure themselves out. At Z Haber and at Chris155, you both kind of asked the same question on Bilal, so I'm going to morph them into one for timing purposes. The questions were basically, will Bilal make a leap? And in doing so, will he demand more touches, be more active on the offensive end? I touched on this a little bit earlier. The answer is, I think he needs to start showing it, and I don't want to harp on this too much because, again, I did touch on it, but I think this is a big year for Bilal Coulibaly. The pressure isn't on just yet. It's not a make or break season. He still has a while to go, and I think they're going to pick up his option regardless. But it's a season where if Bilal plays really well, he's extension eligible. I think, the Wizards would love to extend him no matter what, but it's, how much money are they willing to give up? I think that, and honestly, I'll just touch on my guy Cam Mingo's question as well, because he asked about Bilal being worth a max extension. He's eligible in October of 2026. So not this October, the following October. The max extensions are different for every player. Like, if you make All NBA or Defensive Player of the Year, or win MVP, like the max obviously grows. And so Jalen Williams was eligible for a 5-year, $287 million max because he was All NBA. Chet Holmgren, not All NBA. He signed 5 years, 250. So I think, like, that's the max extension for certain guys, and it obviously varies. It'll be a little bit higher next year, and then there's no way, even if Bilal has a breakout year, that he's going to be getting 5 for 250 like Chet did. There's just no way he's going to get in that realm. Bilal's situation kind of reminds me of Patrick Williams a couple years ago, where, like, the Bulls took him pretty high, and he showed that he was a willing and capable good defender. But the offense wasn't necessarily there. He didn't show enough development. The 3 ball wasn't as consistent as it needed to be. But the Bulls were at a predicament. They were in a spot where they didn't want him to enter free agency, restricted free agency, albeit. And they also didn't want to give him that much money. But they were kind of blocked in, and they gave him 5 years, $90 million. Turned into being one of the bad contracts of the league, and one they really couldn't move off of. And so maybe Bilal's in that realm where the Wizards are still banking on, he hasn't been as good as we would have preferred this early in his career, 3 years in, but we're still going to give him a decent extension. So maybe, and I think it'll be higher, maybe 5 years, $100 million, giving him about 20 a year. It also depends what the market's like for a guy like Bilal, but this is why this is a big year, and this is why I think he does need to make a leap. And I'm fine with the defense. The defense is fine. It's the offensive end, the jump shot. Those are a couple of things that he certainly does need to work on and show that he is a capable player on that end. Moving forward, at Tang Putty asks, is this the year the team is going to focus on team building, or will it be a free-for-all to get minutes and establish themselves for starting roles in the future? Again, I'm just going to touch on this the way I touched on the last one. I think they're going to focus on development and see where everything else falls. I don't think they are strictly, we need to tank, it's a good draft class, all that stuff. I think maybe how unlucky they got this year in the lottery maybe turns them off from that approach and philosophy. And they're just kind of like, you know what? If we're bad, we're bad. We'll be in the lottery. Hopefully we keep our pick. I think that's important to them. I'm not going to say it's not important to them. I think keeping that top 8 pick is big, and I think bottom 4 record obviously guarantees that. So maybe you'll see with some transactions, some minutes later in the season. But I certainly think the beginning, it's just going to be about development, playing the best guys that you can put on the floor, and kind of seeing where it takes the Wizards. You even had a team like the Jazz who were in the similar boat, and they said in the offseason, we're just not tanking. We're just going to try to win. The tanking clearly doesn't work. You're going to get the pick you're going to get. You could be the Mavs and be, outside the top 10 and still get lucky and get the number 1 pick. The year before, the Hawks did, and they didn't deserve to get it. So, maybe the league is just kind of shifting away from that. Moving forward, at Trench Gun the First asks, is Bub the point guard of the future? The Wizards certainly think he can be. Moved off of Poole. Bub is clearly that guy. They traded Denny Avdia to get a couple first and one to turn into Bub, but certainly 2 mainly get Bub. And so that is clearly the Wizards thinking. This is a guy that we're going to give. I'll say this about Bub, especially this year moving forward, like the minutes, the reps, the opportunity. They're all going to be there for Bub, to make it as a starting point guard for this team. They're going to give him the runway to make mistakes and to develop in that role. It's just a matter of, can he take it and run? And I think he can. I did like the way that he did develop from game 1 to game 82. And I can say that because he played in all 82 games as a rookie. So again, I think certainly the optimism is there for him to be that point guard of the future, but a ways to go, certainly. Getting to the final 3 questions. Again, if you guys asked a question, even if you didn't, I appreciate you. My guy Jared at Freethinking1 says, "Hey Greg, I'm interested in knowing if there are any restrictions or rules about how much a player signed to the NBA team can play for the Go-Go. For example, can guys like Will Riley or AJ Johnson play as many games down with the G League team, the Go-Go, as the Wizards want? Are there limits on how many games that they can play, etc.?" It's a great question. I always enjoy my interactions with Jared on Twitter. Certainly knows his stuff, knows ball, knows about the Wizards. This is a good question. I did some research for you, Jared. The answer is yes. Players on standard NBA contracts with 2 or fewer years of service can be assigned to the team's G League affiliate. That's straight from what I was able to find. AJ Johnson is only entering his second year. He's only got 1 year of service. Obviously, a guy like Will Riley, rookie, 0 years of service. They're both eligible to play with the Go-Go, and it appears there is no limit, not that I could find. So it seems like the Wizards can kind of send both of them down. They did it with AJ last year, right? AJ was on that standard rookie deal, and right when they got him for the beginning stages, they played him with the Go-Go. There would be times where the Wizards had a game that day, and AJ didn't play for them because he was playing for the Go-Go. So I think you could certainly see that with him. Maybe Dylan Jones play some games for them. Will Riley certainly early on. And like I mentioned with the rotations, I don't know how these guys are going to find minutes early on. So maybe it's best to say, here, get some reps down the G League. Vukcevic and Jameer Watkins will certainly get some minutes there as well, while the Wizards try to sort out their rotation, at the NBA level. But to answer your question, Jared, yes, AJ can play. Will Riley can play with the Go-Go, and anybody who was on a standard NBA deal with 2 or 4 fewer years of service. Again, thanks, Jared. I appreciate always for the interactions and listening along. My guy at No Breaks NU asks, the Wizards don't seem to prioritize the 4 position, the power forward position. The Wizards are going to play probably a wing there, as this guy is thinking. Who is the best fit, and what does the ideal starting 5 look like? Now, in terms of the floor forward, I think you're spot on. The Wizards are wing. Someone called them Wingstop, and it's a fitting nickname because Will Dawkins clearly likes wings, versatile players that can play multiple positions. The Wizards got a bunch of them, maybe a little too many of them to give minutes around. I think Bilal and George also consider wings. They're candidates to start and play big minutes there. Middleton certainly is a forward. Not sure he's a power forward, but I think he's a candidate to play there as well. Cam Whitmore off the bench is a bigger, taller forward that might be able to fit at the 4. Those are some guys that I think could rotate inside and out. Now, in terms of the ideal starting 5, and by ideal, I could take this as many ways, I guess, as possible without you being here in front of me to explain your question in totality. But by ideal, I'm going to surmise that you're asking me what is the ideal starting 5 by the midway point, for the future of the Wizards.
what does that group look like? And I don't think it looks like CJ McCollum is a part of it, or Middleton for that matter. So I think the ideal starting five, if you're a Wizards fan and you want to just see your future on display, it's Bub Carrington, Tre Johnson, Bilal Coulibaly, Keyshawn George, Alex Sarr. Like it's really cool that the Wizards have, the ability from the past 3 drafts to say, these are our 5 guys. We drafted them all, and I'm really confident that all of them could be starters or already are starters at the NBA level. And so I think by ideal, that's what I'm taking it as. And I think Wizards fans would be ecstatic if at any point in the season they saw them tried out that lineup, all of their first round picks pretty much in the last couple of years. They're going to be starting together. That'd be pretty cool. 4 lottery picks as well. And then I want to round it out. At Jonathan Cabot asked, the Wizards will have a pick at the very end of the first round in 2026. And again, if you don't know, that's the pick they got for taking on Reggie Jackson's contract, trading out Jared Butler. It's the worst of a few teams. I believe it's the Clippers, the Thunder, and the Rockets, I believe, the worst of those 3 teams' first round picks next season. So that's what he's talking about. And 3 picks in the 30s, or I guess 3 picks in the second round, based on what Jonathan is saying. He's saying the Wizards won't keep them all, which I agree with. But are there any way too early takes on what they should be looking for in that range? Honestly, Jonathan, I'm not sure. Like I looked into it a bit, but it's just a little too early to be talking, I guess, about like late first, early second rounders. I feel like those guys kind of come up within the college ranks, and also overseas guys that kind of have big years. So I don't really know. I'm not a draft guru, never, pretended to be. So I don't want to give you any false takes or information based on that. Now, obviously Darren Peterson from Kansas is a guy that I really like. If we're talking early, possibly number 1, number 2 overall pick. Obviously, the Boozers from Duke. Those are some more first round talent that I've definitely looked into a bit, but I don't know if I can give you the best answer, Jonathan, on those guys yet. Tune back in April, May, and June, and then hopefully I'll have some answers for you there. But again, that's the final question. This went a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I hadn't give you guys in a pod in a week, so about 40 minutes. I think you guys deserve that, and certainly do appreciate all of the questions that were given in. A couple of things that I wanted to mention by the end. Former Wizards Jordan Goodwin, Jared Butler signed some training camp deals with the Phoenix Suns. Colby Jones, who was traded by Washington to OKC and later waived, signed a 2-way deal with the Pistons. So that's kind of some like former Wizards transactions. I don't know if you're interested in that, but again, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Wizards podcast. Thanks to everyone who gave me a mailbag question. Thanks to everybody who's listening. And also thanks for 500 subscribers on YouTube. We've been growing the YouTube all throughout the summer. And so I really do appreciate everyone that's gone over there and subscribed. If you haven't, here's your reminder. We already at 500. Let's get another 500. Feel free to hit the subscribe button there. But again, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. I'm not sure what the future holds for the episodes throughout, the month of August and into September, kind of this dead period. If you have any ideas, my DMs are open. The comments are open on YouTube. Shoot me some things to talk about, some guests maybe that you want me to have on and interview or talk about the Wiz with. I'm certainly open to that. But again, that's going to do it for this episode of the Wizards podcast. Thanks for listening, guys. As always, go Wiz.